All right, everybody, very special video today. I want to go through my model of Tesla Robotaxi and why it is possible that Tesla will reach trillions of dollars in valuation. And instead of being in a studio doing that, instead, I'm going to have a Robotaxi take me from one edge of Austin's new geofence to a different edge. And there's different ways of describing those edges, but I'm just gonna be nice and family friendly in describing that. So I'm gonna see where this Robotaxi pulls over. As you saw, I'm sure from the video, there's no driver in the driver's seat. We are at an H-E-B, which is a very popular Texas grocery store. And we're gonna see where this Robotaxi decides to pull over safely for myself to get into the vehicle. And it looks like it's picked the curb right there. So we'll go ahead and get into the car, and then we'll start our presentation. Just a heads up, it's gonna get really nerdy. It's not financial or investment advice, but I do think this might be a pretty cool concept. So we're gonna go ahead and get in the car, and we'll start in a second. All right, and we're gonna go ahead and start our ride. We're gonna watch Robotaxi exit this parking lot. So we'll go ahead and put some slides here on the screen. Apologies in advance to our wonderful safety rider. I'm gonna talk his ear off, but I'm sure, he'll have time to recuperate from this this presentation. So hopefully it goes well. Okay, so we have about 35 minutes to go from one edge to another. And what I did in the last few weeks is put together a model that tries to evaluate what the long-term potential for Robotaxi is going to be from an earnings perspective. And again, this is not financial or investment advice, but I'm gonna go ahead and start putting up the slides on the screen for you all to see. And one of the big takeaways that I've come across is, at scale, this type of approach by Tesla could have the company generate as much as $150,000 of profit per year from each Robotaxi if they charge prices similar to Uber, at least for the medium term, until they become extremely scaled up, at which point the cost per mile should come down. But for the in-between point between now and, let's say, when Tesla gets to 1 or 2 million Robotaxis on the road, and they're at full scale, Tesla could generate as much as $155,000 per Robotaxi. Now, what I do want to get to, and again, not financial or investment advice, and I will put the model in the description as well and in the top comment, so y'all can go in and poke around yourself and see what kind of numbers we're getting. It's going to be all about the teleoperators and supervisors. So what the thought process here is that the long-term ratio of how many Robotaxis Tesla has and the amount of folks that are out there monitoring the car, so the teleoperators and the supervisors, that ratio is what's going to drive long-term profitability for the company. It's not really going to be insurance. It's not going to be maintenance. It's just going to be how good the Robotaxi is going to be from a safety perspective, which is going to allow a really good ratio of Robotaxis to teleoperators. And so for me to describe that, I need to sort of get people caught up to speed on how self-driving cars actually work and the different methodologies out there. So for those of you that are familiar with this technology, feel free to skip ahead to the modeling part. But for those that are not familiar with how this technology works, there's a way that Tesla's doing it that's very markedly different from how competitors are doing it. That's going to allow this company potentially long-term to achieve the types of figures I covered earlier in the presentation. So I forgot to screen record. Sorry guys, let me go ahead and screen record here. Okay, and so the few slides that I've put up from before, you'll see that I've put up. Now I'm going to get into the actual screen recording so that it's synced up. So there's two different ways that self-driving cars are operating today. It's through AI and through brute force. And we'll start with the AI, and then so the AI approach is Tesla's, and then the brute force is everyone else. And what I mean by brute force is, if you look at how sort of Waymo and the competitors are doing it. So Waymo and Zoox and every other player that has a bunch of sensors. They kind of look like this. They have, you know, the LiDAR and the ultrasonics and a bunch of different sensor suites. Those options work today. So you have a situation where the companies are operating. Just today, Waymo also announced that they're expanding their geofence right here in Austin. So now Tesla and Waymo are in this kind of cool competition to see whose, you know, area is bigger. So they've been working. That approach has been working for a while. But the problem is that it's expensive per unit, it's slow to scale, it has a complex sensor suite, and it requires human code. And so this car right here that you can see, all those sensors have to work together. The LiDAR, the radar, the cameras, and it's a mixture of human code and AI code. But the difficulty is for all those things to work together, you're gonna have to spend a lot of time in the code to ensure that's the case. And for every little nuance that arises, you know, intersection complexity, pedestrian complexity, whatever you want to, you know, sort of highlight as a potential issue, railroads, et cetera, all those things are going to have to be accounted for with human code in some respects, okay? And the other part of it is that it's also quite expensive. It's tough to understand how much a company like Waymo is paying for each unit. Their financials are not public, but the estimates are anywhere between $145,000 to $200,000. And they are trying to get down to a new approach with new vehicles from Zeekr in the next couple of years that might get them down to sub 100,000, but it's still going to be expensive in relation to Tesla, and I'll hit on that in a little bit. And so companies like Waymo and Tesla's competition, they learn mostly through human code with AI sprinkled in. Waymo's using more and more AI as the time's coming along, but again, the sensor suite that they have in the cars, in the upcoming cars as well, is going to be significantly more expensive than a Tesla, and they still have to marry the technologies together. Whereas on Tesla's approach with artificial intelligence, it takes forever to get working. But the advantage is that it's cheap per unit, it has huge scale, it has a much simpler sensor suite, and the improvement of the hardware and software is 100% dependent on training compute and the data that gets fed through that training compute. And so, as you saw from the video, this is what the car looks like. It's just a regular car, it just happens to have 8 cameras around the car. And how they really power this type of vehicle is sort of hidden from the public eye, because with a Waymo, you kind of see these crazy sensor suites, right? You're like, oh, look, it's a self-driving car. But Tesla's technology is really at its headquarters. It's really in the training compute clusters that they're building. So I have a picture of that here. This is their Cortex 2 build out that they're doing here in Austin, at the Giga Texas facility. And the idea behind this cluster is that they're going to dump as many GPUs and computers in that building to process all the necessary data for their artificial intelligence system to learn how to drive. That simplicity of having just those 8 cameras around the car, the reason why it's taken so long for Tesla to get to this point where, you know, we don't see anybody in their driver's seat and we have a safety rider with us to ensure, at least with the early stages of this rollout, that it's going safely and nothing bad happens, is that the benefit they get is that the amount of sensors they need in the car is a lot less. They have the 8 cameras and the onboard computer. The total cost of those technologies might be like $2,000 max. But a lot of their expenses are not going to be on the training side. It's going to be on this building. But the long-term advantage of this is that they get massive scale. And the reason why they get massive scale is that the cars themselves are not going to be that expensive to manufacture. So the Model Y, if I zoom into this right here, you can see that it starts today at $37,900 or $37,500 with the EV tax credit, which is going away in September. But that's one of the huge advantages that Tesla has, is that because they are putting the money into this training cluster instead of, you know, in each sensor like Waymo, so instead of putting the money in this car, they're putting the money in the training compute with artificial intelligence, which allows them to get to a Robotaxi that costs $37,500 with the EV tax credit. It'll be closer to $45,000 after that tax credit is gone after September. And this car right here, the same exact car that I'm driving in, literally the same car, is the same one that I'm showing on the screen right now in the slide that starts at $37,500, and it's also the same car that it delivered itself from the factory to someone's apartment a couple of weeks ago. And this car learns strictly with an artificial intelligence looking at good driving behavior. So what has happened in the last few years is that Tesla has released FSD, which is the thing that's driving this car right now. And FSD, it has created a lot of hoopla in a lot of mainstream media outlets. It's like, hey, Tesla has this software that customers are using. Is it unsafe? Is it safe? The customer has to intervene and pay attention. But Tesla's strategy from the very beginning was using that channel to gather all the data necessary and all the good behaviors and bad behaviors from humans to train the artificial intelligence to a point that now, again, the second best-selling car in the world as of 2024, only 2,000 units behind the RAV4, is driving itself in Austin to start. And that artificial intelligence, that training computer, and the car, that marriage together is what has allowed Tesla to get to this point. And Tesla's approach is unique because it allows for massive scale at low per unit cost. So if you compare this approach to Waymo's, again, Waymo costs anywhere between $150,000 to $200,000. Waymo has only about 1,500 cars in their fleet right now. They're planning on making 2,000 more cars in the next year. And long term, they have aspirations to get to 10,000 units per year with a partnership with Zeekr. Tesla makes as many Waymo cars in their fleet, so 1,500 cars every 5 hours, you guys. So this car right here, they make 1,500 of these every 5 hours. And so they essentially 3x, 4x, almost 5x Waymo's entire fleet in one day's production. And that's why the Tesla has such a huge long-term advantage, is because the coverage they're going to get from all these cars roaming around is going to be vastly larger than anyone else. Not just because they have an artificial intelligence system that has learned from all the different roads and all the different conditions through the customer's cars, but they're also going to have the scale, the cars available to be able to do that, because the cost of manufacturing is not that much, especially compared to a Waymo, and they've built a ton of capacity in their existing factories today where they can crank out over 1 million of these cars per year. And so brute force requires humans to solve for complex problems. This is the Waymo approach, the Zeekr approach. But AI solves it on its own and solves it faster with more data and compute. And this is Tesla's approach. They've collected a ton of data, they've thrown it to the training computers, and now you can see this car is driving itself because the AI is solving for it. They've offloaded the solutions to an artificial intelligence instead of a poor human trying to code for every aspect of the car driving itself. Tesla took forever because it had to develop the tech and invest massively in compute. This is why, the narrative has been Elon's always late, Tesla's always late. Yes, they have been late. They've been very bad at setting, expectations and timelines for customers and investors. One could make the argument that, they're misleading. The other argument is, well, this is a very novel problem and it's very hard. And so Tesla's approach just took much longer than they expected. But now that they've essentially solved it, now they're at the point where the scaling advantage they have is gigantic. It's absolutely gigantic. As you can see, we're driving through this road and there is road work. This road work, there wasn't really a need for somebody to go in and be like, yo, make sure you navigate like this on this road. The car just knows to do that because it's learned from a bunch of people navigating around roadworks, right? So that's the artificial intelligence at work. So the foundation has been laid and now it's time to scale. So 0 to 1 is complete. From going to not having self-driving to having self-driving is now complete, as we can see. Again, there's no driver right there. The car is fully driving itself on its own. And now 1 to who knows is underway. So the question becomes, how far can Tesla take this? How many cars can they really get on the road? How good is the system going to be long term? What kind of money can the company make, right? And so again, it's all about the teleoperators and the supervisors that's going to allow Tesla to be able to be successful with this technology long term. So there was this picture from Tesla that they posted when they first released the Robotaxi network in Austin. Here's a picture of folks at the headquarters. But these are, this is sort of how to think about teleoperator supervisors. It's just people out in a place that are looking to make sure that the cars are operating properly. Waymo does this. Zoox is going to do this, or is doing this. All these self-driving companies. Lucid just announced that they're coming out with a self-driving partnership with Uber and one other company. I forget their name, but they're investing $300 million. All these companies are going to have some sort of supervisor / teleoperator to robotaxi ratio to make sure that the car is doing what it's supposed to be doing. And so all these self-driving companies can make a lot of money from self-driving cars. We'll walk through the sort of math as to why this is going to be the case. But as long as they have a ton of cars relative to the amount of operators and supervisors they have, making sure that the cars are behaving properly. So that ratio of robotaxi to teleoperators and supervisors is the most important piece of this entire puzzle. So the cost of teleoperators and supervisors is by far the most expensive part of operations, but you need a lot of cars to make serious money. So let's walk through the numbers, all right? So we'll start with CapEx, which for those that are not familiar is basically capital expenditures, is a fancy way of saying how much money is a company investing in itself. That's one way of thinking about it. How much money are they taking from their bank account and putting in a thing that's going to either help them make money or actively make money for them. As we see this truck here is making a left and the Robotaxi is making room for it. That was actually really awesome to see. That was very, very cool. See, the AI just knows, you guys. The AI just knows. Okay, so again, CapEx is money a company uses to invest in long-term assets. A little bit less fancy way of saying it, but you know, it's just basically a company investing in itself, moving cash from the bank account into some sort of asset. So it could be cars, it could be training compute, it could be whatever. So in the case of capital expenditures, Tesla has more than this, but these are sort of the big ticket items, the ones that are going to cost the company the most to go through. They have robotaxis, they have cars like this that they're going to be building and operating themselves. They have the charging infrastructure, they have cleaning the infrastructure, and they have training compute. So the charging infrastructure is basically all the superchargers and how the cars are going to get the energy back to operate. And then the cleaning infrastructure is, you know, making sure that the car is nice and clean so that I'm not, you know, walking into a dump when I'm hailing a robotaxi, or anybody really. So Tesla makes its own cars. They make about 1.2 million Model Ys. They made about 1.2 million Model Ys in 2024, and they make them out of their own factory. So this is a picture of the Gigafactory Texas location in Austin right here. They also have a factory in Fremont. They have one in Berlin in Germany. Fremont is in California. They also have one in China, and they have one in New York, and they had one in Mexico they were going to build, but looks like that one's on hold. Who knows what's going to happen there? And Tesla has plans on building more facilities and factories. So Tesla can just rely on itself to build the cars. And again, they have 1.2 million capacity of this car specifically, the Model Y. And Waymo has to buy their cars from a supplier. So they've bought about 1,500 so far from Jaguar. They bought 2,000 more for the next 12 months. That car with all the sensors, that's a Jaguar I-Pace, but Jaguar has discontinued that vehicle. And that's why Waymo has to find a new partner, and that's why they've partnered with Zeekr. And Zeekr is starting in 2026 with the goal of building 10,000 Waymos per year. This is what it's going to look like. It looks more futuristic. It's a little bit more designed from the ground up to be a self-driving vehicle. As you can see, it's not going to have any steering wheel or pedals, which is a very, very smart idea to try and maximize the packaging. I really think if they execute this well, they could have a bright future ahead of them, but they're going to be limited by scale because the cost of building these and the amount of factory space they have to build these is going to be vastly limited versus what Tesla has and can produce, because they own their entire supply chain and manufacturing capacity because they make their own cars. So Tesla has about 2 million of existing capacity. So this is 2 million with the Model Y and the Model 3, the Model S, the X, and the Cybertruck. Basically all the factory space they have and how many cars they can make. And they have at least 2 more coming online with CyberCab in the coming years. And CyberCab is sort of this futuristic vehicle that's going to be a 2-seater. I have a picture of that later in the slides, but it's essentially a 2-seater specifically built self-driving car with no steering wheel and pedal, where Tesla's trying to go for this is 90% of the market driving perspective, right? Like most rides are 2 or less people, and CyberCab is optimized for that kind of driving. And so if you tally it all up and you fast forward, say, a few years, a company like Waymo is going to be at a 10,000 per unit capacity, where Tesla could be upwards of 4 million, at the very least 2 million per year. And then Tesla owns its own charging network on top of that, and Tesla has a service network for cleaning and maintenance as well that it can leverage, right? So the supercharger network is something that, if you're an EV fan, you're very familiar with. This is where Teslas go to charge themselves. In a lot of places in the world, these are now open for other manufacturers as well. So superchargers have become a very popular spot for all electric vehicles to charge at. Tesla owns that entire infrastructure and they can build it out at will. And so it makes a lot of sense that they would leverage their existing, so the capex, the expenses, the expenditures they've already done in the existing assets, like the supercharger network, they can use to charge a robotaxi. And then the other thing too is that Tesla owns their own compute clusters to train the cars, and they also own the controls its manufacturing, which we've mentioned before. So Tesla, from top to bottom, sort of owns a lot of the high-ticket items that go into building an entire end-to-end ecosystem for a robotaxi network, a self-driving car network. And Tesla has already sunk a ton of money and time into building the infrastructure. So a lot of these costs are basically going to be eaten already by the business. They're already incurring expenses. They're already incurred the capex. So all the money the company has been making has already been built into the business for this robotaxi network to actually expand, right? So another way of thinking about it is, they don't have to make new expenses or new investments. It's already kind of there. They just have to build on top of it. And so it becomes a question of when robotaxi can start creating cash flow instead of losing money. And cash flow is basically a fancy way of saying, when can this thing make money? This robotaxi thing that I paid $6.90 for this ride, when can it actually start making money so that that cash that the business is generating, Tesla can use to make more cars and to expand its robotaxi fleet, right? And so we need to analyze the cost of operations. So how much does it actually cost to operate a robotaxi network? And this is where the numbers get really fun to go through. So if you're a nerd, welcome. You're gonna have a lot of fun with this. So the primary pieces into operating a robotaxi network on a daily basis, it's going to be, so this is separate from capital expenditures. This is money that you've invested and it's going to work for you. These are expenses that you're gonna have basically on a daily basis that are ongoing forever, okay? You have insurance, maintenance and repair, charging, cleaning, miscellaneous, so other things that might not be in these buckets, and then the teleoperation and supervision of these robotaxis. So the wages that, like the gentleman we have here, our safety rider, and the people at headquarters, they're not doing this for free. They're getting paid, as they should. And so all those things are going to be cost of operations for the robotaxi network. And then charging and cleaning is going to be the actual money spent in the electrons to charge the vehicle, so the actual electricity costs, and then cleaning is the labor and the materials that go into actually cleaning a vehicle, so the vacuum cleaner and the soap, whatever, the labor to actually do that work, etc., etc. So let's figure all this out, okay? So what I've done is I've tried to come up with a way to figure out the insurance cost for robotaxi. So I've done some research. It looks like Waymo's paying something around the order of $25 million per year to insure its entire fleet. Again, these numbers they're difficult to find. It's not publicly available. But I've done some comparisons to like commercial vehicles like 18-wheelers and delivery vans and stuff like that. And that 25 million number divided by the Waymo fleet, which is about 1,500 cars, it turns out that it's about $1,400 a month per Waymo to insure each Waymo vehicle. This is probably very high. It's probably much lower than that, but I still wanted to go on the safe side. It could be higher too, you guys. I'm not really sure. But like a tractor trailer, an 18-wheeler costs something like $600 to $1,000 to insure. A delivery van is like $400 to $600, right? So the Waymo, new technology, if you get into an accident or God forbid something terrible happens, those companies are going to have to pay so much money. Google has more money than God, okay? So they're going to get sued to hell if something happens. So it would make sense for insurance costs to go up. So I'm going to assume about $1,400 a month for insurance using Waymo's numbers. Then for maintenance, repair, electricity, and cleaning fees, these numbers are actually very well known around Teslas. I'm just using basically some very, very well-known figures from consumer report testing, from the average cost of electricity in the United States. Cleaning fee, I'm using some assumptions around how much it would cost depending on how many miles are driven. So maintenance and repair, I'm assuming about 4 cents per mile. This is based on a consumer report study of 100,000 miles over 10 years, of a 10-year cost of about $4,000 to maintain a Model 3 or a Model Y. So the we're in a Model Y, it would make sense to use that. Electricity, I'm assuming a 250 watt hour per mile efficiency at 13 cents per kilowatt hour, and so that's about 3 cents per mile. And then for the cleaning fee, I'm assuming about $350 per month of cleaning expenses per 3,400 miles driven per month, so that's about 10 cents per mile. So the cleaning fee out of those three expenses becomes the highest, but this is just a way for us to understand how much it's going to cost. And then for miscellaneous, I said, you know what, I'm sure I'm missing some stuff. I don't even know what the hell else could go on. I'm just going to say $500 additional per month, and then we would just divide that into some sort of mile number that we come up with. So $500 per month additional charges. Now, when it comes to trying to truly understand how we extrapolate this out for the cost of operations for the business, we need to understand how many miles the Robotaxi is likely to do on an average trip. And so this data is actually publicly available from Uber. We can use Uber's data to arrive at this. So the average Uber trip is about 5.4 miles, and about of the total miles that Uber drives, each driver drives, about 40% of them are deadhead miles, basically empty miles. These are miles that the driver is just waiting for a ride, going from point A to point B, going to pick up the person and then drop somebody off and then go to a different destination, pick somebody else off. So the driver is actually driving a total of 9 miles per trip, but about 40% of those are empty and 5.4 of those are paid. But we have to account for the entire 9 miles to come up with a proper cost of operation, because even during those empty miles, the car needs to be insured, the car needs to be maintained, the car needs to be charged. They're actual operating costs, right? And the average miles per hour for an Uber trip, I did some research on this, some studies. It's about 20 miles per hour. A lot of Uber trips are going to be in the city, so this kind of checks out and makes sense. And the reason why we do this, we need to understand how many trips per hour an Uber driver can do. So if it's 9 miles per trip and they're averaging about 20 miles per hour, then we can do the math to figure out how many trips per hour an Uber or a Robotaxi would do. And so very simple math. If we assume that the Robotaxi operates for 16 hours in a day, the self-driving car, the other 8 hours, it's charging, it's getting cleaned, it's at headquarters getting looked at, maybe it's, you know, getting an upgrade, or it's just there's nobody hailing it, it's just chilling, okay? It's just sitting there having fun, okay? That equates to about 2.2 total trips per hour that the in operation of the Robotaxi actually doing in those 16 hours, so 2.2. And then so the total miles per day, essentially those trips per hour times the amount of miles per trip times the hours of operation, says that Robotaxi on a 16-hour workday will do about 320 miles of work. And that 320 miles of work will actually help us understand what the long-term revenue and expense is going to be for Robotaxi. And so if we look at the per mile cost based on all the math we've done, just of the things that we highlighted, in ruins, looks like I have a typo. That typo is probably going to be on every single slide. Go me. It's going to be 37 cents per mile for the insurance, maintenance and repair, electricity, cleaning, and miscellaneous. But the most important piece of the puzzle, okay, so let me go back and make sure this sticks. So 37 cents per mile cost of operation, because there's no driver, right? This is very important. If you didn't need any teleoperators or supervisors, it would be about 37 cents per mile. Okay, but of course this is not the case. Number one, because we have a wonderful safety rider with us, and number two, we're going to have supervisors and teleoperators for a while with a self-driving platform. And so here's the most important piece of the puzzle. The teleoperators cost per mile is dependent very heavily on the ratio of teleoperators to robotaxis, or robotaxis to teleoperators. And the teleoperator's role is to monitor and intervene when necessary, and it needs to be that person needs to be completely attentive, right? So for every hour that the Robotaxi is in operation, there has to be a teleoperator. And so I'm just going to assume, this is probably the numbers will high, and I hope it's this number. I hope they're getting paid more than this, but I'm just going to assume a nice number. I'm assuming a teleoperator all in, so this is healthcare, this is any potential stock options, HR, training costs, the actual wage. I'm going to assume $100,000 a year. And of course, you need a teleoperator for every shift that the Robotaxi is in operation. And so if we take the monthly teleoperator cost of 8 hours per shift, and then we extrapolate this for the entire day, we don't even say that the Robotaxi is in operation for 16 hours. I'm saying it's just in operation. It's in operation basically the entire time for a 16-hour shift. And then you extrapolate that over 7 days a week. of course, because an 8-hour shift is Monday through Friday, and then 2 shifts is Monday through Friday, 16 hours, but then you also have Saturday and Sunday. The monthly teleoperator cost for 7 days a week is about $24,000 per teleoperator, okay? And so to do the math of how much Robotaxi is actually earning or costing Tesla today, right now Tesla likely operates at something like a 1-to-2 ratio. So they have one Robotaxi and they probably have 2 people manning the operation. So obviously we have our wonderful safety rider, and then we also have somebody in the ether, in the headquarters, overseeing everything and making sure that Robotaxi is doing what it's supposed to be doing, excuse me. So 1 Robotaxi to 2 teleoperators is the actual ratio of the car. And of course I put a picture of a different ride here, but you can see that we have somebody here as well. And so if we do a cost per mile analysis of how much that would cost all in, we will have the same costs we have: the insurance, maintenance, repair, electricity, cleaning, miscellaneous, and then on top of that, we add the teleoperation cost in the second to last line there, which for this existing situation that Tesla has with the safety rider and the teleoperator, it's almost $5 per mile of cost, because again, human labor is extremely expensive, right? So the total cost per mile right now, as it stands today for Tesla right now, it's going to be somewhere in the order of $5 per mile, which is unbelievably expensive, okay? If we compare it to the revenue of how much Robotaxi is doing right now, so this is actually using the old figures. This is using $4.20. It's now $6.90. So just assume the revenue is about 50%, 60% more. The amount of revenue Tesla's making per month is under the $4.20 is somewhere around $4,500. Under the $6.90 per mile is going to be closer to like $7,000. But the huge thing here to keep in mind is that because the cost per mile is so damn expensive at $5 and something, whatever that number was, the revenue per mile of 47 cents, which is closer to 70 cents in this exact ride, you're still going to have a profit per mile that's negative $4 per mile. So Tesla is essentially losing $4 for every mile that this Robotaxi is in operation right now, with a safety rider and a teleoperator at the headquarters. So it's a massive money-losing business as it stands today. So the only way to make money is by improving the ratio of Robotaxis to operators. And so Tesla's doing this by increasing the compute and data. And so it goes back to that other slides that we had, that training computer and its ability to scale, and the system being super, super smart by giving them more data and more miles, all this stuff that Tesla's doing right now. This is the work that Tesla has to do to make the system smarter, is by collecting everyone's data and then building out massive amounts of compute, which is going to allow them to make the system way, way better and way, way safer. This is how Tesla improves that ratio of the Robotaxi to the teleoperator. And so the data is collected through the fleet of existing cars, and there's about 6 million with hardware 3 or newer, which is the computer that's in the cars to actually process and store. This is like loose wording, but it's essentially the hardware that allows Tesla to capture the data necessary and have the intervention that necessary for Robotaxi to learn how to drive. So they have 6 million cars out there already doing this. And the compute itself, to actually training all that data that's being captured, is through massive investments of GPUs and chips, which we've talked about on the CapEx side, right? So that was that Cortex conversation. And we can see that Tesla's already well ahead of the curve in trying to ramp this up. They know this is the only way to get better. And so that's exactly what they're working on. They're working on massively increasing the compute and massively increasing the data they're collecting. Actually, I asked Elon Musk a couple weeks ago, I was like, when does Tesla expect to reach a 3-to-1 or more Robotaxi to supervisor ratio? Because per my analysis, and you'll see this in a few slides here, that's when Robotaxi starts to make money. And then he actually replied to that a day later, and he said, as soon as we feel it is safe to do so, probably within a month or two, we continue to improve Tesla AI with each mile driven. And so if Elon's correct, oftentimes he's not when it comes to timelines, but at some point he will be. This situation, we're going to move into a place where we're no longer going to need safety riders, so our friends are going to leave us to our own devices. And then the number of people that are going to be observing the network and making sure that it's operating properly, the ratio of Robotaxis versus how many they are looking after, that ratio is going to improve massively. And so that's coming here in the next few weeks and few months. But the key takeaway here is that Tesla has the formula. As you've seen for the last half hour or so, this car has been driving itself. I'm in the back seat. I can't do anything. And our safety rider has been watching, making sure that the car is operating safely. So the formula is there. And so we need to assume for this exercise, which I will make the assumption because I had first-hand experience with the technology for a really long time, and I've been testing Robotaxi in Austin since it launched. I basically ride it damn near every day. We need to assume for this exercise that Tesla will start charging prices similar to Uber at some point, because this technology legitimately works as a legitimate use case for ride hailing. And so if Uber is setting the pricing for the market for ride hailing, at least for the medium term, then it stands to reason that a car like this, which is private, and you can control the AC, you can control the music, this car is probably going to go for the same, if not more, and actually have data to back this up. There was a study that was done in San Francisco, and the study was comparing the average price of Lyft, Uber, and Waymo. And so this is the difference in prices between Waymo, Uber, and Lyft in prices per kilometer. So we can convert this to miles. But here's the key takeaway. Lyft is about 14 bucks per kilometer. Uber is about 15 bucks per kilometer. Waymo is $20. Okay? $20. So Waymo is charging, sorry, the one on the right, my apologies. The column on the right is the average price per kilometer. The column on the left is the average price per trip. Excuse me. $14 for Lyft, $15 for Uber, $20 for Waymo. So people are paying a premium for this self-driving vehicle. And so at the very least, we're going to get a situation where people are going to pay just as much as Uber, if not more. What's very super interesting about this fact is that even with the higher pricing, especially relative to Lyft especially, Waymo is now doing more trips and more miles and more rideshare trips in San Francisco than Lyft already. And you can see that with the blue line since Waymo launched on August of 2023. They've been steadily capturing more and more rides in San Francisco. Lyft has been coming down, even though they're the cheapest option. And you can also see Uber's having a downtrend as well. All those rideshare miles are going to Waymo, and Waymo's charging a massive premium. Okay, so Robotaxi being able to charge the same as Uber is not just out of the realm of possibility, is the most likely scenario here. If anything, they might charge more because people seem to really enjoy taking Waymos, and there's data behind that. Same study. So for the people that took Waymo, did you prefer the experience of Waymo versus a regular rideshare with a driver? 70% of people said yes. 16% said no preference. 13% said no. So one way of looking at this is 87% of people will happily take a self-driving car. And 70% of them prefer it to an Uber or Lyft, even at a cost premium. This is a massive study that really points to a platform like this being extremely profitable. If Waymo gets their ratios down, they will be profitable as well. Same thing with Zoox and all the other players, right? And it shouldn't be a surprise. Why? Even at a cost premium, you have privacy, it's comfortable, it's consistent, it's safer. You have immediate pairing with a driver, or a car rather. You don't have to wait or get canceled on all the time. And it's going to be cheaper long term, as we'll see through the slides here as we go through the costs, okay? So the demand for self-driving vehicles is obvious. It's very obvious, you guys. If the technology works and it does this everywhere, people will hail it because you get all those benefits. You get all those benefits, and over time it's going to be cheaper because the biggest cost puzzle of the entire equation, the driver, is no longer there, which is going to cause all kinds of different issues that we can talk about in a different video, but the equation is there. And so if we do the math of how much Tesla could generate if they just charge the same prices as Uber, which is about $2.61 per mile, and they do the same exact average trip, the empty miles are 40%, so 9 miles per trip, 5.4 is paid. They average about 20 miles per hour. The average price of Uber is $2.61. And again, we assume the whole 16 hours in operation. We come up with an average price per trip that's $14, which is closer to the Lyft price in San Francisco. But this is a national average, so it would make sense that the national average would be lower than the cost in San Francisco. If you extrapolate that out for the month, and the Robotaxi is driving about 320 miles per day, Robotaxi is going to generate about $500 per day in revenue, which is equal to $15,000 of revenue per month if they charge the same as Uber. Super simple. This is our baseline. This is how much Tesla could make with Robotaxi right now if they had cars taking trips and they had a geofence big enough where people could just hail the thing and go to the place they're trying to go to, okay? And so now the fun part begins. Now we start to do some math and be like, okay, so what does it look like when you take that assumption where Tesla's going to be able to make as much revenue as Uber, and they incur the costs they're going to incur through different ratios of Robotaxi to teleoperators. So with a 2-to-1 Robotaxi ratio, so if they have 2 Robotaxis to 1 teleoperator or 1 supervisor, so in essence, there would be no safety rider in the car, but they would have 1 supervisor per 2 Robotaxis at the headquarters. So one person's job is just to look at 2 different Robotaxis all day, because the system is good enough and safe enough, to not have to, be paid attention to 24/7, and Tesla can come up with systems that says, hey, notify me if you run into trouble, blah, 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 right? So one person's overseeing 2 Robotaxis. If we go through the same exact cost exercise, insurance, maintenance, repair, electricity, cleaning, miscellaneous, those costs don't really change at all. But the teleoperator cost goes from, in a 1-to-2 ratio of, what was it, like close to $5 per mile to $1.21. Massive difference. Because instead of having 1 Robotaxi to 2 teleoperators, you're going down to 1 teleoperator. And so the total cost per mile for this now becomes $1.58. The revenue per mile all in becomes $1.57. So at the average Uber per mile pricing, and again, we have to account for the deadhead miles. And so the profit per mile becomes break even. So at 2 Robotaxis per 1 teleoperator, the company is flat. That's the ratio they need for this thing to just be flat. And they can just like propagate everything at every place with a Robotaxi, right? And then anything additional, the company makes money. So improving the ratio of Robotaxis to teleoperator, the company makes money. It's a very big deal, and it's like difficult for people to grasp from time to time, because this is like, that ratio is such a huge game changer. And I'll walk through all the different sort of math exercises I've done in here. We're actually finishing our trip here on this first leg of about 40 minutes. As you saw, we didn't run into any issues. I thought this this is kind of cool, walking through all the math of what the thing is capable of, and we're actually doing it in the car, and we can see that, hey, like nothing happened. So what I'm going to do actually now is I'm going to let the car come to a full stop. I'm going to stop the recording on my iPad, and I'm going to pick this up on our next ride, because one ride's not going to be enough to go through all these slides, which is kind of what I thought would happen. And we're going to call another Robotaxi, and then we'll finish out hopefully the rest of the slides on the next ride. And you can also see how this system performs live as well in multiple different situations. So we'll go ahead and gather our belongings here, and then I'll show you guys how the car sort of bolts off too. So please exit vehicle safely. Thank you very much, brother. Sorry for talking your ear off. All right. All right, and then we'll move to the side here. We'll watch this Robotaxi leave, and then once it leaves, I'll call my next Robotaxi, and we'll finish out our video. And it does this little pause here. I think they're doing this pause on purpose, because maybe if somebody forgets something in the car, they can hail the car back and be like, hey, I forgot something. Or, I can run into the car, hey, shit, I needed to get this out of the car or whatever. And then depending on how much traffic there is, maybe it like waits longer. So there might be some sort of algorithm that says, if you don't see any cars around, just kind of wait around and chill. All right, I'm gonna go ahead and maybe if I hail it again, maybe I can take the same one to a different location. So I'm gonna try that and see if that works. All right, everybody, our next ride is coming. We didn't actually get the white one. They sent us a gray one, which is weird because I feel like this car was here for like a minute. So I think there's some algorithm switches that the company can do to like, just let me take that one somewhere else. Instead of waiting like, what was it, like 8-10 minutes for the next one. Should be making a left here any second. So we'll continue our slides in this one that comes up. I still want to show you how the car approaches, how it pulls over, so y'all can, you know, be familiar with the approach that the company's taking as far as, you know, the Robotaxi stuff. As you can see, the car is pulling up now. I'm in a suburban area in South Austin, over by Barton Creek. For those that are familiar with the area, y'all know it's a beautiful part of town. I'll pull over for the car and see where it decides to pick me up. We've had the safety rider before multiple times. I think she's probably sick of me by now, and pray for her, because I'm going to tuck her here off again. All right, I'll pick up once we're in the car. Okay, we're ready for our next ride. We're going to the other side of town in South Austin, so we'll go ahead and start ride, and we'll watch the car do its thing, and we'll pick up where we left off. So the key thing here now that we're talking about before was the ratios of robotaxis to teleoperators. The reason why the cost plummeted so much from the last time is, as you remember, we had a teleoperation cost that was closer to $5 per mile, whereas now it's $1.58. And the reason why it's $1.58 is because you're going from 2 people having to watch 1 car to 1 person having to watch 2 cars. So your cost of teleoperators basically is cut by 1/3, to 1/3 rather. So it's cut by 2/3. And that's why we saw such a big change in the teleoperator costs. And so the key lesson here was that at a 2-to-1 robotaxi to teleoperator ratio, Tesla is break even. They're at break even. And so what happens when they go to a 3-to-1 teleoperator ratio? So 3-to-1, 3 robotaxis to 1 teleoperator. The costs per mile for everything else except the teleoperation stays the same. But the teleoperation cost now comes down to 81 cents, and which makes the total cost per mile of operation $1.18. And if we assume the same revenue per mile from our previous sort of assumptions with the Uber rides, you know, $2.61 per mile, 9 miles total, 40% deadhead, 5 miles paid, etc., the revenue per mile all in is $1.57. Again, because we have to still account for those miles we're not driving around in, which we have to incur costs for. But you still make a profit per mile of 39 cents per mile in profit with all those costs baked in with that 3-to-1 ratio. I'm going to switch from my sunglasses to my reading glasses because I'm blind. All right, so that's that. Okay, so the operator costs come down by 33% when you go from a robotaxi to teleoperator ratio of from 2-to-1 to 3-to-1, and it becomes profitable. And I think that this is like the big story here with self-driving cars as we navigate this very interesting situation with a truck loading up some sort of heavy equipment. Again, the AI figured out how to do that. Nobody has to hard code that into the system. Just the AI knows how to navigate these roads. So it becomes profitable at 3-to-1. And now, if we make that assumption and say, okay, so Tesla, per Elon's tweet, will get to a 3-to-1 ratio in the next month or 2. And by doing that, they're able to match Waymo's fleet of 1,500 cars, because now they've essentially gotten to a point where the amount of cars per person overseeing it, and they'll have safety riders. They can start covering Austin very well. Let's say they start launching in San Francisco and other places. At some point in the near future, it could take them months, it could take them years, but whatever that number is, let's assume they match Waymo's fleet of 1,500 cars, which again, they can manufacture in as little as 5 hours with a 3-to-1 robotaxi ratio. This is what the sort of financials would look like. So 1,500 robotaxis in operation. You assume about a capex, so a investment in the vehicles in your fleet at $35,000 per Robotaxi per Model Y, which is probably high. I think Tesla probably, it cost them significantly less than $35,000 to make a Model Y, but let's assume it's 35. So Tesla invests about $50 million in their vehicles. The yearly teleoperator cost per teleoperator, again, it's about $282,000 across all shifts, 7 days a week. And we assume a 3-to-1 Robotaxi to teleoperator ratio. The total yearly teleoperator cost would be about $141 million, a monthly cost of about $7,800. But because we're able to generate a significant amount of revenue, the monthly net profit from the per Robotaxi is about $3,700. So with a 3-to-1 Robotaxi ratio, the yearly net profit per car with a 3-to-1 ratio with Uber miles and Uber pricing on average, each Robotaxi can make a net profit. So after insurance, after teleoperator costs, after charging, after cleaning, of about $45,000 per year, including the teleoperator costs. So the total net profit per year for the Robotaxi fleet for the entire thing of 1,500 cars will be about $68 million. With only 1,500 cars, okay, operating similarly to Uber. $68 million in net profit, not in revenue, in net profit. So to the bottom line from 1,500 Robotaxi vehicles. In the first year, the ROI, the return on investment, will be $15 million because you have to front the money for the $52 million of actually building the cars, because that's going to be Tesla's cost that's going to be incurred. But then after the first year, so year 2 and onwards, Tesla's going to be making about $68 million because that net profit flows to the bottom line because you already paid for the cars in the first year. So over 5 years, the return on investment from a 1,500 Robotaxi fleet operating very similarly to Uber and assuming all the costs we had is about $288 million of 5-year ROI. Just with 1,500 cars with a 3-to-1 ratio. And so now the fun of this exercise gets to, okay, as we make assumptions around Tesla's ability to grow its compute and get safer and better with its approach, which we're literally seeing with our own 2 eyes as we're driving around Austin and the car's taking us from point A to point B, as we see this fire truck is struggling to make the turn and the car smartly waits and gets going when it needs to. Let's assume Tesla can get to a 5-to-1 Robotaxi ratio. So safety gets better, performance gets better, and then so instead of having 3 Robotaxis to 1 teleoperator, we have 5. This is what the chart looks like. Insurance through miscellaneous, the costs stay the same because we're using the same car, but now your teleoperation costs go down to 48 cents. So your total cost per mile is 85 cents, but your revenue per mile is still $1.57, including those deadhead miles. And so now your profit per mile goes up to 71 cents. So going from 3-to-1 to 5-to-1 nearly doubles profit per mile. We go from 71 cents to 71 cents from 39 cents. And all we had to do was improve the ratio of Robotaxis to teleoperators from 3-to-1 to 5-to-1. So 71 cents per mile versus 39 cents per mile. So a little bit improvement in safety and performance doubles profitability. This is what the 5-year ROI looks like. The total net profit per year per Robotaxi fleet for 1,500 Waymo size is $124 million. The yearly net profit per Robotaxi goes up to $83,000 per year, and the 5-year ROI on 1,500 cars becomes $500 million, so $571 million over the course of 5 years. So now let's start flexing Tesla's secret sauce, which is scale. They've built out all these factories for a reason. And they're using this AI approach for a reason, because they want to get to scale. Scale is not 1,500 cars or even 5,000 cars or even 10,000 cars. It's hundreds of thousands, if not millions of cars. So let's walk through what those numbers look like. So let's say Tesla gets to a 10,000 car fleet, so similar to Zeekr's goal with Waymo, and they keep that 5-to-1 Robotaxi ratio. So the costs go down to 85, so they remain at 85 cents per mile, but we're essentially extrapolating that out to a fleet of 10,000 cars. So the profit per mile is 71 cents. The Robotaxi ratio is not changing, but the number of cars is changing from 1,500 to 10,000. So that becomes a very simple multiplication exercise. You keep the same $83,000 yearly net profit per Robotaxi, but now your total net profit per year for the Robotaxi fleet goes up to $831 million because you have 10,000 cars instead of 1,500. And so your 5-year ROI goes up to 3.8 billion. And that's where you can see the car, the network really starts to flex its muscles. Shout out Terry Blacks. That's been a place for us where we're constantly freaking testing stuff. So they have great barbecue. Go check them out. I probably don't need to tell you. You probably already know Terry Blacks is like, you know, a huge thing. So there was a piece of debris on the road and the car avoided it. So that was super cool to see. I'm glad we caught that on camera. So 3.8 billion. So a 10,000 car fleet, now let's assume they go to a 10-to-1 ratio. So they go from 5-to-1 to 10-to-1. Again, they are flexing their scale. They're flexing their compute. They're flexing their data gathering process. They're flexing their ability to avoid debris like we just saw, right? Most of the costs stay the same, but again, teleoperation costs come down because we're going from 5-to-1 to 10-to-1. So teleoperation costs come down to 24 cents per mile. The total cost per mile goes down to 61 cents. The revenue per mile stays the same, but the profit per mile now goes up to 95 cents per mile. And so the operator costs essentially are cut in half because we're going from 5-to-1 to 10-to-1, and the profit per mile goes up 33%. And so the total figures, this is what they look like. The yearly net profit per Robotaxi is now $111,000 per year. The total net profit per year for the fleet becomes $1 billion. And so the 5-year ROI is about $5 billion. Now, let's take it further. Assume, again, we're flexing our scale muscles. Let's say Tesla gets to the 10% of the size of Uber's US fleet. So not Waymo, Uber. So the actual ride-hailing platform with drivers. Let's say they get, from a regulatory perspective and a scale perspective, to 10% of Uber's fleet, which is 100,000 cars, and they retain that 10-to-1 ratio. The cost per mile stays the same as the last one because our Robotaxi ratio is 10-to-1, so it's 61 cents per mile of total costs, and profit per mile of 95 cents per mile at Uber's average pricing. That fleet, essentially, the amount of money we get now 10x's because we're going from 10,000 cars to 100,000 cars. And so the total net profit from the entire fleet of 100,000 cars is now $11 billion per year, you guys. So the 111,000 per Robotaxi stays, but across 100,000 cars, it's 11 billion. And the 5-year ROI, so you just basically, you account for the CapEx, the upfront cost for 100,000 cars, which is a lot, which is $3.5 billion. Right now you're getting into nutty numbers, and we're going to address these as the slides go on, and we can see how Tesla's thinking about this. The 5-year ROI is 52 billion, but you have to put 3.5 billion up front for the cars. You have to fund the operations, the CapEx for the cars somehow, raising money, loans, or just funding it with your own business, selling the cars, selling energy products, selling bots, etc., etc. But now, the one thing we have to keep in mind is that staffing teleoperators for 100,000 cars at a 10-to-1 ratio is going to become a challenge because now this model assumes you're going to have 10,000 teleoperators and supervisors. Theoretically, you can very much do that. There are companies that employ way more than 10,000 people, but when you have that many people, you start to have complexity. HR becomes a bigger challenge. Training becomes a bigger challenge. As an organization, you want to be as lean as humanly possible, and that's something that Tesla loves to do. So that going to 100-to-1 Robotaxi ratio is one way of solving this. And you do this, again, by investing massive amounts of training and massive amounts of compute. More data, more chips. More data, more chips. So you essentially move the money from investing in supervisors and teleoperators, and you invest it heavily in training compute so you can massively reduce the number of teleoperators you have. So what does that math look like? If Tesla's able to achieve this, 100-to-1 Robotaxi ratio, your teleoperator costs plummet to almost nothing. Your insurance, your maintenance, repair, your charging, etc., all those costs stay the same because it's still the Model Y. But your teleoperator costs plummet from whatever the price was, 20 cents or 40 cents or 80 cents, now it's down to 2 cents per mile. Because instead of having 3 robotaxis to one person or 10 robotaxis to one person, now you have 100 robotaxis to one person. So one person in the headquarters is responsible for a fleet of 100 robotaxis at any given time. And because the chances of an accident or something wrong happening, assuming that Tesla continues to get way better with compute as compute scales, it's so rare that there's no point in just having like a high ratio of like people watching robotaxis. It gets to a point where in the random blue moon, you may get a notification that says, yo, this car got in trouble, can you go help it, right? That's through compute and safety. Because of that teleoperator cost plummeting, now you're getting much better profit per mile. It now goes up to $1.17 per mile. The cost per mile of teleoperators virtually gone at 2 cents per mile once you reach a 100-to-1 teleoperator or robotaxi to teleoperator ratio. And so now with a fleet of 100,000 cars as before, but now instead of 10,000 teleoperators, we have 1,000 teleoperators. The yearly net profit per robotaxi goes to 136,000. The net profit for the fleet of 100,000 goes up to 13 billion per year, and a 5-year ROI of $64 billion. So let's take this further. Now that you've gotten to a point where you have a 100-to-1 robotaxi ratio, instead of employing 10,000 people, you can employ only 1,000 people. I wonder what would happen if we match Uber's active fleet in the US of 1 million cars, 1 million active drivers. You can afford to do it. You're just going back to the 10,000 teleoperators. And 10,000 teleoperators is like, what is that? Like less than 3% of the total staff that Tesla hires on any given year. So let's run through the numbers. Robotaxi, because of its superior technology, safety, comfort, privacy, all the studies we saw where people prefer self-driving car over Uber or Lyft, all that starts to play out. Tesla has the scale. They've been building like crazy. They own the factories, right? 1 million robotaxis matching Uber's fleet, 100-to-1 robotaxi ratio with the Model Y robotaxi. It now goes to $136 billion in net profit per year from the entire fleet of 1 million cars, and a 5-year ROI of $650 billion. And this is where the math for robotaxi starts to really take off. And the work that Tesla has done this whole time to get this thing to drive itself, which they make him. So I want to make sure I drive this point. This car right here, Tesla made 1.2 million of them. The exercise we just went through just now with 1 million cars, Tesla made that many last year of the same, you guys, the same exact car that we were going to arrive 8 minutes. The same exact car, this one right here, with our wonderful safety rider chilling. Okay? Yes, I got a chuckle. Yes. So that's one thing to keep in mind, is that this is not some sort of like weird, like mystery future that doesn't exist. It exists right now. I'm in the car right now. Now, what Tesla has to do, they have to get safe. And it's funny, we have a Waymo right in front of us too. Isn't that hilarious? How all this, like the universe is aligning everything for us right now. This is a exercise of training compute and data. This is not an exercise of make-believe, hope technology arrives. They've already have the foundation, they have the sauce, they've built it out. They just have to do more of it. It's just time at this point, okay? But now you're getting at the point where there's massive CapEx. 1 million robotaxis is going to cost the company $35 billion, you guys. They have to spend $35 billion to make 1 million robotaxis. And then they need 10,000 operators at a 100-to-1 ratio. So how do you solve for this? CyberCab. And this is where CyberCab will help the company go, you're still going to spend a lot of money in CapEx, but the amount of cash flow they're going to get per dollar of CapEx spent will become way, way, way more efficient, because the cost of making a CyberCab is going to be significantly lower, the cost of operation is going to be significantly lower, and the safety is going to be significantly higher. So the CyberCab is going to give the company improved CapEx, maximum AI performance, because they're using the brand new chip with AI 5, and that's going to result in really good safety and really good robotaxi ratios, because if it's really safe, you don't need as many teleoperators. In case you're not familiar, Tesla AI 5, previously known as Hardware 5, is a next-generation self-driving computer designed to significantly enhance Tesla's self-driving capability. This car has Hardware 4, and this car has been driving itself. Hardware 5 is going to be expected to be 10 times more powerful than this car's capability. So 10 times more powerful, which implies some level of multiplication on the safety and performance of the vehicle, which is going to dramatically help the company reach a level where they don't have to have that many teleoperators. And with the CyberCab, we know that one of the big things that the company is doing is reducing the cost of manufacturing. And what reducing the cost of manufacturing means is that the cost of purchasing each Robotaxi is going to go down from $35,000 with the Model Y, again, that's probably on the high side, to $20,000 with the CyberCab, which again is probably going to be on the high side. $20,000, CyberCab at scale is probably going to be closer to 15 or less. And because of that additional safety, that additional performance, that additional technology, the ratios are going to get to a point where you may have a situation where you have 1,000 to 1 Robotaxi ratio. That's the only way this thing makes sense long term, knowing how many cars Tesla is going to build. You need a really good Robotaxi ratio. And Tesla is doing all the necessary legwork to get there from a technology perspective. So what does this mean? When you have a cheap to build car that's going to be unbelievably safe, because the AI performance is going to be so damn good that it's basically not going to get into an accident or get itself into trouble. You're going to be super safe. So you're going to have low insurance costs because it's super safe. You have lower electricity costs, lower maintenance, and lower repairs, and every other cost associated with operating the vehicle, perhaps outside of cleaning. Maybe cleaning is going to be a little lower because the car is going to be smaller, and other miscellaneous costs because the car is going to be more purpose-built for this specific application. So you're going to get all these benefits because of the steps that Tesla has decided to do with the CyberCab. So the insurance costs plummet, the cost of operation is mostly cleaning, charging, maintenance, and repair. And in this case, let's assume a $300 a month insurance cost, because the car is going to be so damn safe that it's basically not going to need any sort of, nowhere near as much costs associated with the insurance as they would have. But again, if we look at the previous math, insurance costs are really not that big of a deal if you have a self-driving car that can operate at a high level with low teleoperators and supervisors per Robotaxi. That is the cost. It's not insurance. But with a really safe car, your insurance costs will obviously go down. So let's assume that it goes down to $300 a month, which is about the average for a car in the United States that somebody drives. It's actually probably a little bit higher than average, honestly. But let's assume the insurance costs are the same as one with a driver, which would be a lot lower because self-driving cars are going to be much safer. And we assume 30% lower costs for charging, maintenance, repair, etc., etc. This is what the math is going to look like. So again, we assume a 10 to 1 ratio, the same revenue as we would in an Uber. Our insurance per month now goes down to $300. Our maintenance repair goes down to $273 per month. Electricity to $225. Cleaning, we're going to keep at $1,000. Miscellaneous at $500. And the teleoperation per month at 1,000 to 1 ratio is only $24 because again, we have one person looking over 1,000 Robotaxis. So your yearly total profit per Robotaxi now goes up to $12,900. The total profit per year for a Robotaxi fleet of 1 million cars, or per car, sorry, is $155,000. And if you extrapolate out all those costs over per mile, your total cost per mile now becomes 24 cents per mile because your insurance costs are down, your maintenance and repair costs are down, your teleoperation cost is basically non-existent. And so when you account for all those costs, we go down to 24 cents per mile. If we keep the same average price of Uber per ride, it's still $1.57. We go down to $1.33 per mile of profit with CyberCab. All right, so we just finished our second ride. I guess we'll do a third one. We're still not done. My God, I talk so much. Holy shit. All right, let's go ahead and do another ride. Thank you very much. Sorry for talking your ear off again. Seems like we're becoming best friends. Hope you have a good day.
Have a good one.
And I hope for your sake you don't get me again. Have a good one. See ya. All right, so we'll watch this thing go. And then we'll hail our next one. I guess we'll bask in the sun a little bit. And then I guess we'll finish out by just going back to where we started. I guess we'll do a trifecta. We'll do the whole thing. We'll do the whole thing. You know what I'm saying, right? All right, let me go hail the last one, and then we'll finish out our slides. And hopefully for the sake of our safety riders, we don't get repeats, because yeah, I feel sorry for them. All right, we'll be back. All right, ladies and gentlemen, this should be the last leg. We're gonna go all the way back to whence we came. Hopefully it's the last one. I don't know how much more I can talk. I mean, I can. I know how much more I can talk. I can talk a lot more than this, unfortunately for everybody. But yeah, we should see the Robotaxi coming here any minute. And there it is. And yeah, so we're gonna hop on and we're gonna go see where we're gonna end up, which is gonna be back at HEB. So it's pulling over up there. We're gonna go get in the Robotaxi. We'll do our usual show the app thing, and then we'll be on our way very shortly. I should have brought some water. I am parched. All right, here we go. Okay, we are going to our last destination, going back to the HEB in North Austin. And we'll go ahead and restart our screen record on the iPad. We'll finish out our, whatever this is, this presentation, slide thing, deck, whatever. Okay, so $1.33 profit per mile with CyberCab, 30% lower cost than Model Y, and teleoperator ratio, Robotaxi to teleoperator ratio to 1,000 to 1, $155,000. Total profit per year per Robotaxi, $1.33 profit per mile. So because we made those improvements with CyberCab, we got the electricity costs down, we got the maintenance repair costs down, we got the insurance costs way down, and we plummeted our teleoperator costs from 2 cents to nothing, which is not gonna make that big of a difference, but it obviously is gonna do something. Cost per mile is now down 38%, but our profit is also up 14%. And now you're at the point where you get some diminishing returns from lowering the cost per mile because the fleet size is so big and you've gotten so many economies of scale that lowering your cost from a dollars perspective, it might be big percentages, but from a dollars and cents perspective, it's not going to be that much, but your profit's still going to be up 14%. But the big benefit you're going to get here is scale. It's massive scale. Because of CyberCab, because of Robotaxi, because of Model Y, because of the training compute and all those factories you've built and everything that you've put together, you're now enabling the ability to put millions of cars on the road. And so if we look at the math for 1 million Robotaxis in operation at CyberCab economies, you have a Robotaxi to teleoperator ratio of 1,000 to 1. Your monthly teleoperator costs are $24 per month. The monthly net profit per Robotaxi is about $13,000, $155,000 per year. And so the entire fleet of 1 million CyberCabs is going to generate about $155 billion of profit, net profit again, after all the costs assumed and at Uber pricing, $155 billion and a 5-year ROI of $755 billion. 1 million Robotaxis will cost you about $20 billion in CapEx to build out if Tesla chooses to build their own CyberCabs and put them out there. So Uber pricing, 1 million CyberCabs in the US only with 1,000 to 1 ratio, which essentially means 1,000 operators. And so if you take that $155 billion of net profit potential from a fleet of 1 million CyberCabs at a price earnings ratio of 20, so a price earnings ratio is basically a standard way for the stock market to value a company, and the 20 number is pretty conservative. It's like, hey, you are a big company with potential, not crazy growth ahead of you, not crazy technology and innovation ahead of you. It's like, I don't know, it's like a better version of Apple. It's like if Apple was doing what they're supposed to be doing, that'd be closer to a 20, maybe who knows, maybe a higher PE, maybe 30. If it has an NVIDIA PE, price earnings, this number would be significantly higher, but I'm trying to be conservative in areas, obviously. So 155 billion at 20 price earnings, that values the Robotaxi business with 1,000 CyberCabs doing that kind of earnings at 3.1 trillion. Just 1 million CyberCabs just in the United States at Uber's pricing with that kind of ratios, right? Just 1 million CyberCab, 1 million cars acting as Robotaxis, which again is equivalent to half a year's production out of Tesla's facility, or almost 1 year's worth of production of this specific car. Tesla made 1.2 million of these last year. So Tesla has complete control over pricing, but it's up to them how much profit they want to give up. So they're choosing in this model to charge Uber pricing, but when you have that much profitability into your business, you can decide to make the price whatever you want because you're making so much damn money, right? But there are big questions here. So how do you get to this point? So it needs to be safe enough, right? So the question becomes, when will it be safe enough? When will the training compute get to a point where you can have those kinds of ratios? When will the company feel safe enough to put that many cars out on the road? When will they feel safe enough to no longer use safety riders in the vehicles? How fast can Tesla actually scale this product? Do they need to use, are regulators going to get in their way? Are they going to be able to safely maintain this robotaxi network in the areas and the geofences that they go to? How many geofences do they have to visit in order to get the type of scale that they need to reach? What happens when the first accident or injury or death happens from the robotaxi network, right? So what kind of issues are they going to encounter from the perspective of, trying to operate the robotaxi network if something were to happen? So are they going to have safety implications? Are they going to have issues when it comes to, with regulators? They're going to be like, oh my God, what the heck is happening with this service? This is weird. This is actually something to highlight here. The car was sort of inching along. It was going 50 miles an hour because we had that sort of red light, slow stop thing. And I wonder if the car maybe thought it was in a school zone, which it could have been. I didn't pay attention, but for about 1/10 of a mile there, it was going a little bit significantly slower actually than the speed limit. And then once cars started passing it, it started going faster again. So that was an interesting thing to see. But see, so this is a perfect example, right? These little things, although that wasn't unsafe or nothing, it was just kind of like little awkward. When is Tesla going to get to the point where all of those are essentially deleted to a point where they can get to 1 million cars, right? And if, God forbid, something happens, how will the company deal with those issues? What sort of hurdles do they need to go through, et cetera, et cetera? How many regions can they get into? So is it 1 million cars in just the United States? Is it going to be 10 million across the world, 10 million robotaxis? Is it going to be only 100,000? How will regulators catch up with the company? Will the company run into a lot of hurdles from a safety perspective to try and convince the regulators? We know the company has been working with people in Europe, in the United States, in China to try to make this technology as available as possible. Are they going to run into issues with that? And again, regulators are a big one. Are they going to be friendly? Are they going to be unfriendly? I just saw that the newest appointee for NHTSA, which is the National Highway Traffic Safety Administration in the United States, apparently he's not, or she, I can't remember their name, but they're not friendly towards Elon Musk, apparently. Is that going to cause some issues? We know Secretary Duffy, the Secretary of Transportation, seems to be a big fan of Tesla and Elon Musk, but are they going to run into issues with NHTSA, right? How much CapEx, so how much investment does Tesla have to make into the charging infrastructure and the cleaning infrastructure? So one of the assumptions I'm making here is that a lot of that is already baked into the business. Significant. They're still going to need to make chargers, obviously, and cleaning spots. They could leverage their existing service center network, but they're going to have to add more spots. How much is that going to cost? How are they going to run into permitting issues, right? What sort of complexities is that going to present? And what about competition? We know Waymo is working on stuff. We know, Lucid and Uber are working on stuff. We know Zoox is working on stuff. There's a bunch of other players coming on board. My argument would be none of those are even close to the amount of scale Tesla has from a training perspective, a data perspective, a manufacturing perspective. So those competitors, in my opinion, are very far behind. But could they one day appear? Sure, of course. Of course. So what does that mean for the valuation? From a politics perspective, Elon Musk has talked about making a new third party, the America Party. So will Elon starting a third party make regulation harder in the United States potentially because of politics, right? We know politics is a dirty sport. We saw the stuff that happened with the Democrat Party. We saw what happened with the Republican Party, yanking the EV tax credit, right? So is this going to generate more heartache, or is it going to create a forcing function for regulators to actually pay attention and maybe align more with Elon's agenda? Just a risk that's out there. I want to leave you with this thought. So Uber's active global fleet is about 6 million active drivers today. They have 6 million drivers. And so what if Tesla matches this? What if Tesla matches that number? And that's ultimately what this exercise is all about. The goal here is to get you guys an exposure into the technology, which I'm very fortunate to have been able to do, having access to this robotaxi network in Austin, and showing you guys the technology live while we go through a model of a hypothetical But from my perspective, I feel like it's likely to happen. It's not financial and investment advice, but I've thought about this a long time. I'm very familiar with the company. I actually have hands-on experience with the technology. I'm literally showing you exactly what I'm seeing every time. I'm making all my videos public for everyone to see. I made my Waymo videos public for everyone to see, right? So the question becomes, how likely is this? And if it is likely, how will the market value it? And that's it. That's really ultimately it. So I hope this was helpful. I'm gonna leave the camera just go for the rest of the ride so y'all can see how the car performs for the next half hour. We've been here freaking long enough already. What's another half hour? So I'll leave the camera on for y'all. I'll finally give your ears some rest. I'll be quiet. And I'll just let y'all take in the sights and sounds of Austin as we make it back to HEB. And if you need to go back and look at any of the slides that I put forth, go for it. We'll see what we run into here in the last half hour. We might run into some interesting situations. We'll see how the car performs. But I'll let the car go for now, and I'll see you on the flip side. Thank you, boss.
Of course, have a great day.
You too, thank you. All right. And we have arrived at our final and simultaneously first destination. So we'll watch this thing go because it's a pretty busy parking lot. We're back at the H-E-B that we started at. We have some traffic going around. The car's currently stopped, waiting to do its thing. There's a car behind it, waiting for it to move. This person might go around, we'll see. There you go, now it's moving. And off it goes. Let's see how it behaves here. There you go. It's gonna make its way out of the parking lot as usual. So, that went as well as it could have hoped. That was about, what was it, like close to an hour and a half, maybe an hour and 45 of drive time, about 30 miles. You saw it go from one side of the geofence to another. We talked about numbers the whole time. Hopefully y'all enjoyed that. And now it's just a matter of watching this thing scale. Let's see how much bigger the geofence gets. Let's see how many more cars they can add. Let's see where they can remove the safety riders. And then once they start hitting their stride, this thing should get pretty epic pretty quickly. So thank you very much for watching. I hope you had a very good time. Now I gotta remember where I parked. All right, everybody.